called Jigsaw Renaissance. If you're ever there, you're welcome to visit. And I take a great interest in how spaces like these are run and what we can learn from each other. So I'm a part of a group that's forming to help that out. So we have things like hacker spaces, maker spaces, and co-working spaces. And while all of these things are kind of different in what their focus is, they all share the same sort of root system. We all have to worry and enjoy the same sorts of things. We get to write membership documents, what you get and what you pay for that, and what you're expected to act like. Accounting, finding someone who understands double entry bookkeeping, and that it's okay to take apart this power book is actually harder to find than you would think, at least it is in many areas. Bylaws suck to write, but they're necessary if you want to be a 501c3. Insurance, also persuading insurance agents that it's okay to be 24-hour accessible with power tools and that kids are often okay. They kind of hate you for that. But we get to have great membership, like who participates, what they make out of the space. We get to work on collaboration, what we work on together as well as between spaces. And we get to do outreach, so to the schools in your neighborhood, to the arts communities in your neighborhood, to the other spaces across the US and elsewhere. And so I'm one of 5 groups that have kind of banded together to figure out what we can learn from each other and how we can help one another. The first was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called Bucketworks. It was founded in 2002. They have been successful for 8 years. They're mostly co-working, but they've also done a lot of hackery and makery things. And that's run by James Carlson, who is my mentor. So while I'm in Seattle and we started up Jigsaw Renaissance, we didn't have to worry about all of the bootstrapping and the, I don't even know what we need here, and there are zoning permits, who does that? He's just like, hey, here's the process we went through, and that means that we moved into a space January 1st, and we're already at 57 members. And Sector 67 in Madison just opened. And in Dallas, Texas, Creative Contraption is just now starting. They're going to open up in 2011. And then in Chicago, Pumping Station 1 has existed for a while, but they're starting to share the information that of the process that they went through so that we can learn from them to see what they might have missed to make themselves better, things like that. So all of us are under the fiscal sponsorship of the School Factory, which was also started by James way back in 2002. And that allows us to get the profits of being an official nonprofit while we work on gaining our own. And because it takes a year to get your nonprofit status, not just your state, but your national nonprofit status, and then it's another 2 years before you can use it in any sort of way. And then in 5 years after you applied for it, they come and they do an investigation thing and they see what you're about. And this means that all of that is taken care of by someone else, which means I get to spend more time working on projects rather than doing paperwork. We're also learning from each other and having whole conversations. We do that with a thing called Yammer, which is like Twitter for internal networks. If you want to be on that, I would love to invite you to it. We just have conversations about, hey, there's somebody sleeping in the space and I've never had to deal with this. It's not on our bylaws. Has anybody else dealt with this? Or, hey, we're writing our bylaws and I have no idea, what do I start with? What do I have to cover? We're making a constellation survey. A constellation because it's patterns between spaces. I like puns, as a quantitative study to see what we might miss because we're so immersed in what it is we're talking about, see what patterns emerge out of that. And then from that information, with the conversation and the quantitative stuff, we're building a Make a Space kit, which means that when spaces start up, they just go through this task management system of, hey, here are some suggestions of what you think might be involved. And we're clocking it in at about 450 tasks right now, and that's for 4 stages of discovery, formation, the third one I always forget, and then outreach. And so it's the stages that everybody goes through. And so that's the overview, and if you want to get involved, you can do that by joining the Yammer. You actually have to email me. I'm talking to them about fixing this bug where you can't apply to join on, but we'll work it out. We're also building our own, so we don't have to deal with other people fixing it for us. You can contribute. This is all going to be open to whoever wants. That's why we're here today. Whoever wants to learn from this, we will be sharing the information freely because we can all learn from it. Even if you don't want to be a nonprofit, if you already have your own, if you don't care what other places are doing, you just want to see like a little bit of guidance or whatever, just examples, we're happy to show that. And spread the word, because we can only make it physically to so many spaces before our cats get really pissed off at us. So if you want to spread it on other spaces, that's totally welcome. And that's the overview of that section of the talk. Anyone have any questions?
The foundation that you're under for the 501c3, like shielding and stuff like that, is that something that to like bootstrap? Because we're in the process right now of getting our classification going, but it would be real simple if we could go under an Aegis while that's working.
Yep, that's what PS1 is doing right now.
Is that what they're doing exactly?
Yep.
So, I mean, is there any like special techniques or tricks to that?
It means that if you get donations over $250, it has to go to the school factory, and then they take, I think it's like 5% maybe, and then they send it to you. If it's over $5,000, the board of their directors has to sign off on it, but they believe in what it is that spaces like these are doing, so it's easy. And that means that they take care of all the practical stuff.
Excellent. But we'll have to talk more about this later.
Yes, definitely.
Joe seems very interested.
Yes. I am not working on that anymore.
No, it's important to still, I mean,
No.
James is okay with, James is the founder of both Pocketworks and the School Factory. He established both because he wanted them to be separate, so that he could worry about one or the other at a time. But he's fine with supporting people, but he also wants spaces to be independent, like learning from each other. So don't stop working on it, just not to such a degree. And also, it's called the School Factory because we have a very strong inclination that spaces like these are filling the educational gaps that are occurring. There are more and more schools that are charter schools that are project-based learning because we're no longer, the school system that we have doesn't work anymore. And the people who have been trying to fix it haven't been fixing it in a way that's viable. And so it's spaces like these that people come to for the rest of their lives, where we're still teaching each other. It doesn't matter what your age is or what your background is, you'll be able to teach other people and learn from other people. That's why it's called the School Factory. Now that's kind of out of left field sometimes. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I'll be around for a while afterwards. The next part is about spaces like these are awesome, and we can learn a lot from each other, but we also need to solve more than just the hashtag first world problems. We also need to help people who are in the developing world, and that's what Diggs is here to talk to you about. Yay!
So, hi, my name is Johnny Diggs. I am the co-founder and chief technology evangelist at Voxeo. We're based in Orlando. And I've been doing startups and technology stuff for about 20 years now. So I, about, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, 2005 Hurricane Katrina kind of came through New Orleans and did some damage. And if you were like me, you were kind of glued to finding out information about it. There was a little group inside, right in downtown New Orleans that had it was a little shared web hosting / data center, and these guys had a generator and they kept things running through the whole time, and it started helping outside of what they were there just to keep their customers up, but then they realized very quickly that they had communication to the outside world when nobody else did, and they could do things and help people put resources where they needed to be faster than the local governments, faster than the federal government. And since then, we've seen this type of thing happen in crisis situations. It happened in Haiti. It happened during tsunami. It's happening right now in Pakistan with the floods that have been ravaging over there. So what has happened is in response to these individual crises, groups of people have kind of banded together and to try to help solve problems there. Sometimes groups send people there, sometimes they've been brainstorming here to help people logistically over there. And so I started thinking that maybe all of these individual groups that are kind of one-offing every time there's a situation could start banding together and communicating. And so I came up with what I call Geeks Without Borders. I announced it in Seattle about 3 weeks ago. Quickly found out that there was a guy in Oregon that already has a group called Geeks Without Borders. So we're going to change the name, but GWOBorg is it now.
Sorry, I found a spelling error. I found a spelling error. I have to fix it now.
The one time that I always forget the presentation, and she's always like, "Oh, wait, you skipped this and moved over." And the one time I go to refer to what was on the screen, it's there. I'm kidding. So anyway, GWOBorg, as we're calling it, I thought was. I kind of came up with a mission statement. I based it off of the Doctors Without Borders mission statement, and basically it's a group to assist people whose lives are their survival could be threatened through lack of access to communications or technology, through violence, neglect, or catastrophe. And so right now we're visiting different hacker communities across the U.S. to get them to kind of join, but also get feedback about how we can help, because as we visit every space, and this is the 6th or 7th space that we visited in the last couple of weeks, we're learning more and more about different groups and different efforts and different people to talk to, and so a lot of this is absorbing information and two-way communication to figure out how this is going to work. One way it could work is, can you go to the next one? Sorry. Yeah, okay. So I thought of this idea of what I call the digital mountaintop, which would be an open communications network. The reason I thought of this is because my company, Voxeo, has an open communications network already that spans the globe, and with data centers in Beijing and Germany and London and 3 in the U.S., and it talks open standards. And so I was like, wow, we could use this network that we've built for the last 10 years and help people communicate in situations where they can't normally. So I call it the digital mountaintop because people can potentially request help from the digital mountaintop, and so it goes into some sort of what I think is a trouble ticket system. We don't have that figured out yet, but it's some kind of a help desk system, maybe a new one, or maybe one that already exists that we can modify, and listening to those requests would be Geeks, and we're calling those the Cloud Collective. Right now, it could be, there are groups that are already banding together, like Crisis Commons, that already have groups that are doing these kinds of things. So we connect the dots sort of with these other groups, and when a request comes in from somewhere for assistance, we take the natural problem-solving ability of Geeks. We all like to solve problems. And focus that on solving problems in developing countries or places that have some sort of a crisis situation. How do we do that? Well, someone asked me, could you give me an example of something practical how this could help? And I thought of an example of, if, let's say there's someone who every day they have to walk 5 miles to go get water out of a well. And some days they go there and there's no water in the well. Well, they could potentially make a request on the digital mountaintop and say, hey, I've got a lot of developing nations now have cell phones and they do text messaging. And so wouldn't it be nice if I could send a text message to find out automatically whether there's water in the well today? And the point of the water in the well is that if there's a community that's in crisis, we could sit here and brainstorm all we want about what they might need, but really until they tell us what they need, we're not going to be able to help them effectively. And so the water in the well is basically applications that could potentially be built that talk to the digital mountaintop or help define problems in areas that communicate to the digital mountaintop, that are listened to by the Cloud Collective, and hopefully solve some problems along the way. Because this is all new, like literally, Will and I were talking about it. We just met. I went to Seattle to talk about this at a conference called Nodex, and that was August 20th, and that was the first time I really expressed this idea to a large group of people. And we immediately, I started talking to Willow about, we were hosting, my company was hosting a hackathon nearby as part of the conference to get people to build open government applications. Basically, there's a lot of data out there that our government has, and they don't really know what to do with it. It's data, and that data can be turned into information, useful information, by people who know how to do such things, developers usually. And so we got a bunch of hackers together and spent 24 hours building open government applications. And we got some sponsors, and they offered some prizes. Some people made some cool little applications, like one that sends you a text message if the fire department has been notified that your house is on fire. We call that Notifier. And some other really neat applications, like there's one that you can subscribe to a Twitter feed, and it will tell you if there are police calls to addresses in your neighborhood, and they're working now to make that even better, so you can be text messaged if there's certain types of police calls. Like, you don't necessarily need to be notified every time someone, maybe there's an illegally parked car, but if there's a violent crime within a few blocks of your house, you might like to get a text message to know maybe to stay inside, or go outside, depending on your so the contest that we had, the hackathon in Seattle, was really successful, and I thought maybe we could do that again on a larger scale and invite hacker spaces across the country to participate. And so on 10-10-10, we're going to announce what this GWOBorg thing is and what the pieces parts are after talking to groups like you and others, and kind of making our best choice on what we think it should be. And for the 24 hours leading up to the announcement of that, we're going to have a multi-city hackathon. We've got one sponsor so far, which is my company, and that if they're giving away like close to $10,000 worth of prizes. If you write an application either an open government application or something that helps solve one of these problems that we've identified, you can win $1,000. If you're associated with a space like this, the space will also win $1,000. They've got other prizes like iPads and stuff like that. And so all you have to do is sign up. There's like an Eventbrite registration thing. Hey, there it is. So it's free to sign up. You just have to sign up by October 7th. And there's some rules. Each sponsor can set up their own rules. So if you want to win the Tropo prize, you have to use their API in order to blah, 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 basic stuff. But no other real catches other than that. What else? Is that about it?
We have, let's see, we have Skype going on, so if you want to join in the conversation. We have Skype where the feed is much longer than that, but it's okay. So you can join in on that. We have posted a link to that a couple times on the Twitter feed, and we're going to post a link to that on the website. How do you come up with ideas? Oh, okay. So the way that we come up with ideas,
Okay, go ahead.
okay, is so one of the reasons that Shannon is with us on this trip, which we really, really appreciate, is that we understand that I've never traveled overseas. I don't know what people need, but there are travel bloggers that travel everywhere that see developing nations in the light of knowing what technology exists and what might be able to solve problems, and also what is culturally appropriate and sensitive. We're also hoping to talk to the Red Cross and the Peace Corps and the Geek Corps and all these other organizations that know a little bit more about negotiating this territory. But what we're looking for right now are people that are willing to help that aren't necessarily gung-ho just when there's an earthquake. But, hey, I have an extra 10 minutes, I can help out with something. Or, hey, I have this 24-hour period where I can write an application that might be useful at some point that will throw up on the GitHub, and people can pull from that when there is a crisis instead of having to start from scratch every single time. Does that answer the question? And more? Cool.
One of the other things that we've been talking about, and what I thought was cool about visiting hackerspaces, is that in the event that there is something that happens in your community, a lot of hackerspaces or individuals that are part of hackerspaces have plans in place, just because of their very nature, to deal with these types of situations. So if there is a tornado or earthquake or something, that zombie apocalypse that happens in an area, the local hackerspaces, who they become the digital mountaintop, and the Cloud Collective then listens to them about what resources need to be. It basically, it's not replace the American Red Cross and the federal government in that, but it's more the level of neighbors helping neighbors, right? When I lived in Central Florida, we had Hurricane Charlie come through, and it knocked out power in Orlando. I've been in Orlando for 30 years, and I had never seen a hurricane like that, and it just devastated all of our infrastructure. And suddenly, it's the middle of September, or late August, I think it was. It was really hot. No one had ice. All of a sudden food started going bad, no one had power, then you find out which of your friends have power still, and who's got Wi-Fi, and cell phone towers are down, and so ham radio friends started popping up, and so we want to help activate those communities and individuals that are already doing this, or already likely to react that way, and enable them to be able to shout to a much larger audience of people who are ready to help. Any other questions? Well, thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. One question.
Yeah.
On the when the crisis comes, usually when they knock out the power, your cell phone is going to be useless. My question is is there any possible way that we can twist our cell phone into a satellite phone? When you have a satellite phone, then you don't have to worry about the power down and so forth. I noticed that in the military, we've been using this for at least about past 20 years.
Sure.
And when we go into a foreign country where they have absolutely no power, we can have communication in the state or all over the world.
There are that's an excellent question. There are some solutions for that. I've been talking specifically to a guy named David Burgess, who has a mobile 2G network that is portable, and it's called OpenBTS. It's an Open GSM stack, and literally you can set this thing up and have a backpack full of charged cell phones and start handing them out, and people can start text messaging to each other immediately. And if you already have a GSM phone, it can leave right on the network, and and be connected. And then that network can be connected to the internet or satellite or whatever. Much more effective and much more cost effective than handing out satellite phones. Basically, the equivalent of burner cell phones, little GSM stuff that you can get at 7-Eleven, can talk to this thing. And so we've been talking to him and some other groups and companies that are building similar things about solving that type of issue. And we also realized that there are a lot of real-world problems that happen when you don't have power or electricity or access to technology. And we know that we are not always going to be able to solve those problems. But when someone can get to a landline or a cell phone or get in touch with a friend who has access to Skype or Twitter, who can tweet a request, that's when we can activate and start helping. Unfortunately, before that happens, there's not a whole lot we can do, but there are other groups that can get boots on the ground and help get those things connected.
And this is much more an answer for people who have already started on some level of connectivity. Southeast Asia, Africa have very prevalent use of cell phones. This is not for certain small towns in Guatemala where there's just no contact. There's not a lot of ways that we can help. There are plenty of areas that we can. And there's also an issue of setting up networks where minutes are already very valuable. It's very disruptive, but we can use what exists to help people out.
The other question is that since you mentioned about the power shortage and so forth, when prices come in, basically you have no power other than your own generator. This thing came into my mind about a while ago, but I never, really developed. Is anybody trying to develop a generator basically pretty much is self-perpetuate? I understand the physics law, okay? I understand what it's talking about, but I'm still going to go ahead and talk about that. The reason for that because that, a lot of this law, even though they're the electrical engineer, I myself is an electrical engineer, okay? The problem is a lot of this so-called law, several years later, they have changed. Give you a prime example. Several years ago, many years ago, they said that current is flown from positive to negative, and Einstein proved that it is from negative to positive. So therefore, there's a lot of different things. So perpetual motion, a lot of different things. And I want to one time that I want to really prove that can be possible.
I've been doing a little research recently in this exact area. Because that would solve a lot of our problems globally if we could figure out a way to more than just crisis, but if we could figure that problem out. There's some really interesting stuff that has been happening in radioactive generators that work off of decay.
That's a little bit dangerous.
Absolutely.
But let me explain to you.
But I don't think it includes everyone.
Let me explain to you what I'm coming from a little bit more safe. Okay, in order for electricity to come out, in my understanding, is cutting the electromagnetic flux. Okay, you have a flux
I think that this is a conversation that the two of you need to have. This is not big enough for the whole group.
Yeah, we can talk about it though. It's interesting stuff. But yeah, that would be a huge thing, is figuring out how to power in places that can't get power.
Is there any other feedback?
I just got one thing to say, and I never really put it into perspective with the hackerspace, but it brings that up. Last year, if you guys recall, we had Hurricane, was it Ivan, that came rolling up through here, all the way up to Kentucky, knocked out a bunch of trees and power lines. And also, we had that big ice storm. I guess that was last year? Yeah. I mean, I never realized what it was like living without power, but it kind of sucks.
Last year too.
And as a hackerspace, we need to be looking at, what can we do as our community to help out, because we have some resources and some expertise that not everybody has. So this is good. It's good to be thinking about this.
And we'll be around for a little while longer before we continue our long trek. We're headed to Atlanta next, so.
Yeah, we've been to spaces in. We went to Crash Space in Los Angeles first, then Noise Bridge and Mission Social. Next space in San Francisco. We visited I-3 in Detroit. And yesterday we were at Pumpkin Station 1 in Chicago. We're here today. Tomorrow we're in Atlanta, and we're going to take a few days off.
And then if you're at Maker Faire Detroit, I'll be there, and then we'll be doing.
New York.
New York.
Maker Faire. You said Detroit.
You said
Sorry.
it's already happened.
It's already happened.
Maker Faire New York.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll be visiting some spaces in the Northeast, and then we're going to go out to Portland and Seattle at the end. And then I really hope that you guys will join us all for the 10-10-10 hackathon, and see if we can, make some of the first water in the well apps.
Easy question. What were you running your presentation on?
It's Prezi, P-R-E-Z-I. It's free and it's super easy to use, and I'm kind of in love with it. These were built though
Is that Prezi with a Z?
Yeah. These were built by James Carlson out of Bucketworks, because he's my mentor and he dumps far more time into things than I probably deserve. It's like, I will build this for you.
Now, the 10-10 hackathon, when does it start? Does it start on 10-10-10 or is it 10-9-10?
It ends on 10-10-10. So 10-10-10 is a Sunday, and we are planning on making the announcement of the winners at will be 1 p.m. East Coast time. So the deadline for entries is going to be 10 a.m. East Coast time. So technically, I don't know which your time zone is here. Is it Eastern? So it'll go from 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. Saturday to Sunday. And obviously you don't have to participate the whole time, but we'd like anybody who can get a video stream up and going. We're going to have show as many of them that are going on. We're going to, the companies that are sponsoring, at least Tropo anyway, we're going to be sending representatives to help show how you can hook their APIs in. Tropo does a lot of cool things with integrating with Skype and Twitter and all of those communication stuff. So, but we're talking to others as well to help do other sponsorship. So, but yeah.
So I'll just go ahead and announce we'll be participating. And so I'll make sure to follow our website and our group. We'll get Chaos folks involved as well to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, and just follow us for some more updates, and we'll organize around that as well.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Sounds like fun.
All right, thanks again, guys. All right, everybody, hack on.
Cool. Very cool. Oh, very nice. So are we still on?
This is streaming now, but I'll go ahead and stop it.
Oh, okay.